When 16-year-old Madison stood up to a cruel cafeteria insult about her complexion, she didn't just silence her bully. She sparked a school-wide awakening that no one saw coming. Lunch period at Lincoln Heights Academy in Portland, Maine, was always a whirlwind of voices and movement. The cafeteria painted a perfect picture of high school hierarchy. Athletes claiming their territory at one end, drama kids rehearsing lines at another, and everyone else carving out their own little spaces of belonging in between. In the midst of this organized chaos, Madison sat at her usual spot near the floor-to-ceiling windows. The autumn sunlight caught the intricate braids framing her face, casting a warm glow that matched her gentle demeanor. She chose this corner carefully, quiet enough to find peace, yet not so isolated that she felt completely invisible. If you're enjoying this story of courage and standing up for what's right, take a moment to subscribe. There's much more to come. Madison had learned early that standing out wasn't always a blessing. Being one of the few Black students in a predominantly white school meant walking a delicate line. Her confidence was often mistaken for attitude, her laughter deemed too loud, her very presence somehow interpreted as a challenge to the status quo. Still, she smiled, her warm amber eyes taking in her surroundings as she opened her lunch container. The aroma of her grandmother's famous jambalaya, still warm and comforting, drifted upward. Across the room, fragments of conversations floated by. Whispers about the upcoming homecoming game, someone's elaborate weekend plans, the usual high school chatter that filled these walls. Madison had mastered the art of fading into the background, keeping her head down to avoid drawing unwanted attention. But peace, she would soon learn, never lasted long in these halls. It started subtly, like distant thunder before a storm. A group of juniors, led by Nathan Thompson and his usual followers, huddled a few tables away. Their laughter grew sharper, cutting through the air like shattered glass. Madison didn't need to turn around. She'd felt this kind of attention before. Too dark, right? Nathan's voice carried across the room, deliberately loud enough to ensure she heard every word. You'd think she'd get it by now. Madison froze, her fork suspended in midair. The sting of his words hit her like ice water, but years of practice had taught her to mask the pain. She set her utensil down with deliberate care, her movements measured and controlled. Turning slightly, she caught Nathan's smug grin and Olivia's poorly disguised snicker. Other students nearby shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent, their discomfort evident but their courage lacking. The air in the cafeteria seemed to thicken, heavy with tension and unspoken words. Stay with us to see how Madison handles this moment of truth, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge our perspectives and celebrate the power of standing up for what's right. Madison's heart raced beneath her calm exterior. She had weathered moments like these before, swallowing her hurt and letting cruel words slide off her shoulders. But this time felt different. This time, the insult carried more weight, as if Nathan was deliberately trying to provoke a reaction. "What's wrong, Madison?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest. "Nothing to say? Cat got your tongue?" The cafeteria's usual buzz softened to a whisper. Conversations dwindled to nothing as heads turned toward the corner of the room. It was as if the entire student body collectively held their breath, waiting to see what would unfold. If you're captivated by this story of courage in the face of prejudice, take a brief moment to subscribe. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Madison's grip tightened on her fork as her mind raced through her options. She could do what she'd always done, ignore it and let the moment pass. Or she could finally take a stand. Nathan smirked, leaning forward like a predator sensing weakness. "What's wrong, Madison? Maybe it's hard to talk when you're dash." "Nathan, stop," someone muttered from his table. It was Olivia, her voice barely a whisper, though her half-hearted attempt at intervention did little to deter him. Madison took a slow, deliberate breath. With measured movements, she pushed her lunch aside and rose from her chair. The sound of metal scraping against tile echoed through the silent cafeteria. Every eye was on her now, but her focus remained solely on Nathan. "Honest," she repeated, her voice calm yet sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You call that honesty?" Nathan forced a laugh, though the sound rang hollow. Yeah, someone had to say it. The murmurs in the room grew louder, a mix of gasps and whispers as Madison took a step closer to his table. Her stance was unwavering, shoulders back, head high. You think you're brave? Madison asked, her voice steady but charged with an undercurrent of strength that silenced every whisper in the room. Standing here, surrounded by your little group, thinking you can tear someone down because you feel small inside? The smirk faltered on Nathan's face. What are you even talking about? Oh, I'm sorry, Madison continued, her tone cool, but her words blazing with truth. Did I use too many big words for you? Let me make it simple. You're insecure, Nathan. And instead of fixing what's broken in you, you try to break people like me. Stay with us for the powerful conclusion of Madison's story. This is a moment you won't want to miss. The cafeteria fell into complete silence. Even the lunch monitors, who usually maintain their distance from teenage drama, stood frozen, their eyes locked on the unfolding scene. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his cocky demeanor cracking under the weight of Madison's words. But you think it's funny, don't you? Madison's voice rose just enough to command the room, each word deliberate and clear. Making jokes about my skin as if I don't already know what you think of me. As if I haven't heard it 100 times before from people exactly like you. Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He glanced around at his friends for support, but Olivia avoided his gaze, and the others suddenly found their lunch trays fascinating. Madison stepped closer, the tension in the room crackling like electricity before a storm. Her focus remained locked on Nathan as she tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips, not one of amusement, but of quiet, unshakable confidence. You know what's truly funny, Nathan, she said, her tone shifting sharper now. How you can sit there, so sure of yourself, thinking your words have power over me. But let me tell you something you clearly don't understand. If this story of courage and self-empowerment speaks to you, take a moment to subscribe. Together, we can amplify voices that need to be heard. My skin, she gestured to herself, her movement graceful and proud. This is beautiful. It carries history, strength, and resilience that you couldn't begin to comprehend. You don't get to decide what it means, and you definitely don't get to make me feel ashamed of it. Nathan's face flushed red, his bravado crumbling like a sandcastle in the tide. The cafeteria remained eerily quiet, the kind of silence where even a whisper would echo off the walls. Madison wasn't just addressing Nathan anymore. Her voice carried across the room, reaching every person who had ever stayed silent in the face of cruelty, every student who had ever felt different, every soul who needed to hear these words. You mock what's different because you're scared, she continued, her voice unwavering. Scared of what you don't understand. So desperate for attention that you'll tear someone else down just to feel bigger. That's not strength, Nathan. That's the definition of weakness. A murmur rippled through the cafeteria. Students who had never spoken to Madison were nodding, their expressions shifting from indifference to admiration. Others looked down at their hands, perhaps reflecting on times they'd stayed silent when they should have spoken up. And let me ask you this, Madison said, taking another step closer. What exactly do you gain by trying to humiliate me? Does it make you feel better about yourself? Does it fix whatever's missing in your life? Nathan stammered, his confidence now completely shattered. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't mean it? Madison's voice rose slightly, carrying years of unspoken truth. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to make me feel small. But guess what? It didn't work. It never will. If you're moved by this story of standing up against prejudice, hit that subscribe button. We have more powerful stories of courage and transformation coming your way. The crowd was captivated, hanging on her every word. Even the kids who usually avoided confrontation couldn't look away. Madison's confidence was magnetic, her words piercing through the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But here's the thing, Nathan, Madison said, softening her tone slightly but maintaining her edge. You don't get to write my story. I do. And in my story, I'm not the victim. I'm the hero. I stand up, I speak out, and I make people like you realize just how small your words really are. The cafeteria remained frozen in time, the weight of Madison's words hanging in the air. Then, slowly, someone began clapping. It started hesitantly, but grew louder, spreading through the room like wildfire. Madison didn't smile or gloat. She simply stood tall, her expression serene, her gaze steady. The ripples of Madison's words spread far beyond that afternoon in the cafeteria. By the next day, her confrontation with Nathan had become more than just another piece of high school drama. It had evolved into a catalyst for change at Lincoln Heights Academy. Did you hear what Madison said to Nathan? The whispers in the hallways carried a different tone now. Not the usual gossip, but something deeper, more meaningful. Some praised her courage, while others debated whether she'd gone too far. But no one could deny the impact of her words. Madison carried on as if nothing had changed, walking the halls with quiet dignity. She had no interest in becoming the center of attention or feeding into the growing legend of the cafeteria showdown. But she noticed the subtle shifts, the way people met her eyes now, offered small smiles, or simply acknowledged her presence. If you're finding value in this story of transformation and courage, consider subscribing. There's power in sharing stories that challenge us to be better. In her advanced literature class, something remarkable happened. During a discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird, a usually quiet student raised his hand. "Why do we stay silent when we see others being hurt?" he asked. "Is it fear or something deeper?" The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, paused thoughtfully before steering the conversation into an unexpectedly profound discussion about prejudice, silence, and the cost of complacency. Madison sat quietly, listening as her classmates grappled with uncomfortable truths. Later that week, Madison was organizing her locker when she heard footsteps approach. It was Olivia, shifting nervously from foot to foot, her designer backpack clutched tightly against her chest. "Madison," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to say something. I'm sorry, not just for laughing that day, but for every time I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that speaking up would only make things worse. But watching you stand there, so strong and sure, it made me realize how wrong I've been. Remember to subscribe if you want more stories about real courage and the power of speaking truth to ignorance. The changes weren't just individual. Principal Reynolds introduced a new initiative on inclusion and respect, weaving these themes into daily announcements and school assemblies. Teachers began addressing microaggressions in their classrooms, creating space for honest discussions about race, identity, and belonging. Nathan's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. Gone was the swaggering bully who dominated the cafeteria. In his place was a quieter, more thoughtful person who kept to himself. He never directly apologized to Madison, but she often caught him watching her with an expression that spoke of regret and perhaps understanding. 1 month after the incident, Madison sat at her usual window seat, watching autumn leaves dance across the courtyard. Her best friend, Ashley, slid into the chair across from her. "You know," Ashley said, unwrapping her sandwich, "things are different now. People are actually talking about stuff that matters, not just pretending everything's fine." Madison smiled, her eyes still on the swirling leaves outside. "Sometimes all it takes is one voice," she said softly. "One person willing to stand up and say enough." The cafeteria still buzzed with the usual teenage energy. Sports teams planning weekend games, drama club members rehearsing lines, freshmen navigating social circles. But there was a subtle difference now, an undercurrent of awareness that hadn't existed before. "You know what really gets me?" Ashley continued, leaning forward. "It's not just that you stood up to Nathan. It's how you did it. You didn't fight hate with hate. You showed everyone what real strength looks like. If stories of courage and transformation resonate with you, take a moment to subscribe. Together, we can build a community that celebrates authentic voices." Madison glanced around the cafeteria, taking in the scene. Nathan's old table was now occupied by a diverse group of students studying together. The rigid social boundaries that had once divided the space seemed softer somehow, more permeable. "Sometimes," Madison said, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned life's harder lessons early. The bravest thing isn't fighting back. It's standing firm in your truth and refusing to let anyone dim your light. As weeks turned into months, the impact of that day continued to ripple through Lincoln Heights Academy. The school newspaper launched a weekly column about student experiences with diversity and inclusion. The Student Council, inspired by Madison's courage, initiated a mentorship program pairing upperclassmen with freshmen who felt out of place. But perhaps the most profound change was the one that couldn't be seen or measured. The shift in consciousness that had taken root in the hearts and minds of students and teachers alike. One afternoon, as autumn turned to winter, Madison found a note slipped into her locker. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Your words that day didn't just change Nathan. They changed all of us. Thank you for showing us what courage looks like. If this story has touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that celebrate the power of speaking truth and standing tall. Madison's story reminds us that true change often begins with a single voice, one person brave enough to stand up and speak their truth. In that ordinary school cafeteria, on what seemed like just another day, a 16-year-old girl didn't just confront a bully. She sparked a revolution of consciousness that would ripple far beyond those walls. Her story teaches us that our voices matter, that silence in the face of injustice only serves those who wish to maintain it, and that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is standing firmly in your own light, refusing to let anyone dim your shine. Remember, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about speaking up even when your voice shakes, standing tall even when others try to make you feel small, and knowing that your truth is worth fighting for. Because in the end, it's not just about winning an argument or silencing a bully. It's about creating a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued for exactly who they are. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the extraordinary power we all possess to create positive change, one brave moment at a time.